One of the special features of the Gospel according to Luke is the heavy use of parables. Now, it's true that all the Gospels use parables to some extent, but Luke uses them quite a bit more, and many of our favorite stories about Jesus are actually parables that are found in the Gospels or perhaps just in this one book. And so we want to spend some time studying parables, and you'll be working on parables in your study groups. And so let's spend just a moment looking at what makes parables, and what is the best way to try to mind the deaf, because they seem to be a simple story, but they usually hold a pretty profound truth. So here's a basic formula for parables. The way that they're structured, this is not true of all parables, but if you'd be looking for these things, you'll find a deeper way of engaging the parables and coming to understand their application for us today. The first thing is that every one of the parables is a story about common life experiences. Now, when I say that, I say it was common life experiences for people in Jesus' day. So he will often say, a farmer went out to his field. And if you're like I am, a person that never grew up on a farm, that sounds like a pretty strange and exotic experience. But to people in Jesus' day, 90% of them were farmers. And so when Jesus says a farmer went out to his field, he's saying, you all know what it's like to be a farmer, because they all did. Having talked about a common experience, Jesus then pops in some unexpected or shocking turn of events. That's why I like to say that parables start soft, but end with a bang. And so it's a common thing that a man would go out and work in his field. It's a very shocking thing that he would find any kind of pearl, but especially a pearl of great price. And as we learn to discern what's going on in these parables, often we'll find that Jesus starts with a story that everyone knows how it ends, but before he gets to the end, he shocks them, he gives them a surprise, he interjects something that's unique to his story. The next thing that we want to consider is that in the parables, there's usually just one central point. There's not a whole lot of different ideas or a whole lot of different applications, but they're a short story with a shocking event, and the central point, the main point, usually arises out of that shocking event. So the whole point is telling the story of a man went out to the field. It's not that men farm or women farm, but rather it's this one guy found a very shocking thing in his field. The final part of the basic format for parables is that there is a response from the listener that's usually implied. Jesus tells a story because he wants you to do something, but he leaves it a little bit up in the air exactly what you should do. So the central point of the parable of great price might be something to the effect that when we find Jesus, we find something that's the most valuable thing of all. That's a central point, but the question is, then what do we do about that? And you might suggest, well, one response is that when Jesus calls me to make a sacrifice, it is a small sacrifice and compared to the pearl of great price that I find in him. So that's the basic format of the parables. Now we want to look at interpreting parables, because it's a little bit more to the package than just that 4-point format. The first question when we're interpreting a parable, as with any passage, is to ask, does the context hint at the parable's message? Luke is told as one nice story. Remember, it's a sermon moving to a conclusion. And so often, Luke, the gospel writer, will give us a little bit of a hint as to what we should be getting out of the parable by the story that happens or the events or the saying right before the parable comes. And so every time we do a study on a parable, we want to see what happened right before. The parable of the prodigal son, which is a great story, deepens in meaning about 100% we recognize that Jesus was having a controversial discussion with the Pharisees, and that this is his answer to some of the things that they were unhappy with. The next thing that we want to do is, having identified the common experience, what is the common experience in this parable? We need to do a little bit of digging, a little bit of research. If you're not a farmer and you have a farming parable, do some research on what that kind of farming's all about. It wouldn't hurt to do some research on what pearls are and where pearls are usually found and what pearls meant at the time of Jesus. And these are things that you find in Bible dictionaries or Bible encyclopedias. A good Bible website will tell you what is that common experience and give you a little bit of insight, so that as you look for the shocking event, you find that against the background of the common experience, now I'm seeing why this is such a shocking thing, why this is such a unique story. And then, of course, what is the shocking turn of events? That will become pretty apparent once you know what the common experience is. And you will see in nice relief and nice contrast what is the shocking turn of events. This won't always be in your parable, but it's in the vast majority of them. And then we need to ask, what is the central message of the parable? What is the timeless principle? It's nice that there's a story back then, but what is the principle? And we state this in somewhat generic truth. And we end by asking the question, how do we live out this truth? No Bible study is ever complete until we've asked and come up at least with tentative answers to, here's how my life can be different, how it should be different, how it can take advantage of all the promises of Christ. Here's how I move into the fullness of what the Bible has laid out before me. So let's do this together. I will do one for you, and then actually we will bring it together and conclude it in our class on Thursday morning. But it's the story of the vineyard laborers, and we're going to look at the context, and then we'll look at the common experience, and we'll draw from that. Matthew 20, 1 through 4, and we'll just kind of read through this parable. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius for the day and sent them into his vineyard. About 9 in the morning, he went out and saw others standing at the marketplace doing nothing. He told them, "You also go and work in my vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right." And so they went. He went out again about noon and about 3 in the afternoon and did the same thing over and over again. About 5 in the afternoon, he went out and found others still standing around. And he asked them, "Why have you been standing here all day doing nothing?" "Because no one hired us," they answered. And he said to them, "You go also and work in my vineyard." When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, "Call the workers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last ones hired and going on to the first." The workers who were hired about 5 in the afternoon came, and they each received a denarius. And so when those came who were hired first, they expected to receive more. But each one of them also received a denarius. When they received it, they began to grumble against the landowner. "Those who were hired last worked only 1 hour," they said, "and you've made them equal to us, who've borne the burden of the work and the heat of the day." But he answered one of them, "I'm not being unfair to you, friend. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius?" "Take what belongs to you and go. I choose to give to this last worker as I gave to you. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or do you begrudge my generosity? And so the last will be first, and the first last. So that's the parable of the laborers in the vineyard. Now we ask that first question in the interpretive approach, and that is, what is the context of the parable? And we can go back to the last few verses right before the parable, and we find that they really are setting us up for what the parable wants to teach us. Look at the phrases from the 4 verses right before our parable. Peter responds to Jesus by saying, well, we've left everything to follow you. What then will there be for us? What's in it for us? And Jesus said to them, truly I tell you, at the renewal of all things, when the Son of Man sits on his glorious throne, you who have followed me will also sit on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. And everyone who's left houses, or brothers, or sister, or mother, or wife, or children, or even fields for my sake, will receive 100 times as much, and will inherit eternal life. But many who are the first will be last, and many who are the last will be first. And you can't get a much better hint that this story is the cause for Jesus' parable by the fact that the story and the parable end with the last phrase. The context is Peter wanting to know if he's going to get more than anyone else since he's been with Jesus from the very beginning. And so what is the common experience in the parable of the vineyard laborers? It says that they went out and they worked in a vineyard, which is one of the very common things that people did in Jesus' day. Now, most of you have not had to work in a vineyard. You may have a few grapevines in your backyard, or maybe some of you do have vineyards. And so I think maybe it's a little bit more helpful for us to say we're talking about people working at Dutch Bros or working at Fred Meyer. It's people who did the basic labor that's necessary to make the economy run. Very common experience. Everyone works. In fact, in this story, there's also the story of unemployment, people who waited around all day, but no one would hire them. And recently, through the Great Recession, many of us experienced that common experience, unfortunately. So what is the shocking turn of events? After going out and working, Jesus pays extravagantly. Now, you should know that a denarius is not what was given usually to farm workers who worked all day. It's a little bit more than that. And so even the beginning workers who worked all day got a slight little bonus over what most people would earn. And so we have a generous man to begin with. At the very beginning, he's a generous man. But then he pays a little bit more than a full day's wage to people who worked for just an hour or so. Extravagant pay. But not only is the pay extravagant, it's equal. It's extravagant for one, and actually it's extravagant or a little bonus for everyone, but it's equal pay. And you can tell by the story in this case that the people who were the last to be paid and the first to work, that they were shocked by the turn of events. But actually, the people who worked for just 1 hour and got paid a denarius should have been shocked too. They were smart enough not to say anything, though. So what's the central message or the timeless principle? Well, one way we might say it is don't grumble, because God's gift is always extravagant. But maybe more to the point, don't compare yourself to how others are doing in the church. Rejoice in what you have received and how God is taking care of you. Well, how do we live out this principle? And this is what I want you to do when you come to class on Thursday, is to come with at least one very realistic way in which you can show to the world that you're living on the basis of this parable. How are you enjoying the extravagant gift of God? How are you good and accommodating yourself to the equality of God's pay? How are you rejoicing in the things that you know that God will bring your way? How do we live out this principle? That is the question that we will begin class with when we get to this discussion on Thursday morning. I was taught a parable is an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. And I still like that. There's a lot to it. But it just scratches the surface like most of our studies of parables. There's always a little bit deeper that we can go. What I'm learning that excites me right now is that overall the parables are teaching us this incredible promise. They offer the promise to us that in the most ordinary events, Jesus meets with us, offering us amazing grace. I love the parables. I think you love the parables too. And as we work together through this semester, I think we'll find that not only are they great stories that are easy to remember, but they continue to pull us into that promise of the life that God has prepared for us.